years 1 through 5 were extremely difficult. I'm talking, like I said, missed payroll, run into the bank, run into the mailbox, praying that a check's there.
Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Logan Jones here with Evan Knowles. Today, joined by Silas Deane. So Silas has recently had an exit from his startup called VendEngine for over $84 million. Silas is also an inductee to Gatton's Hall of Fame. He currently is chairman of the board for Gatton's Von Allman Center for Entrepreneurship, and all around a huge supporter of the University of Kentucky and entrepreneurship in this region. So we sat down with Silas to listen to his story about how he started VendEngine and his journey as an entrepreneur and everything he learned from being an entrepreneur during the dot-com boom and bust to ultimately selling VendEngine to Tyler Technologies for over $84 million. So it was awesome to be able to sit down in person here at our friend JP Blevins' place to record this episode. Super excited for you guys to listen to it. Before we dive in, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Before we highlight our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. That being said, Middle Tech is supported by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you are a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. All right, Silas, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you here is, you're a graduate of the University of Kentucky, a graduate of Gatton School of Business. Would love to just take us back to when you were a student. So kind of give us a snapshot into, what kind of student you were, and I have some other questions there, but we'll start there.
Okay, well, I'm not sure why we have to go back to that, but no, I would say I was 3 different students throughout my course at UK. When I first came, I was completely unprepared for college. I had no idea. I thought I was at summer camp. I didn't. I remember the first time my roommate went to go buy his books, and I'm like, "You have to buy books?" Like I didn't know that. So I was very unprepared for college, and so the first year was rough. I somehow managed to survive that, and by the time I came back for my second year, I was ready to get a little more serious. I joined the rugby team, and that made me a little less serious, but at the same time, provided a lot of focus and sort of helped build that camaraderie with the brotherhood there. And then, really my senior year, I sort of found my stride, and I began to get more and more. I ran for student government. I won. I was a student senator at UK and, became a leader on campus, was quoted in the newspaper all the time, always fighting for some cause of some sort. And in those days, that was the days of Happy Chandler had said some racist remarks, and it was a little rocky there for a minute. And as a student leader, it was a fun place to be. Finally, my senior year, I was getting ready to graduate with an economics degree, and my professor, Dr. Krislov, came to me and said, you're a good guy, Si, but I don't think you're going to become an economist. And so he took me under his wing and introduced me to the world of politics and sort of got me connected to Al Gore, who was running for president at the time. And I was able to, a week later, be driving a guy running for president of the United States and sitting in the governor's mansion with Governor Wilkinson at the time, along with Al Gore and me in a room. And I was hooked. And I loved politics from that day on, and it was a great ending to the UK story.
What attracted you to that? You said you won, UK Senate, and then you fell in love with politics pretty quickly. What about it attracted you?
Well, it was fun because you felt like you could make a difference, right? This was in 1988, 89. There was a presidential election going on. It was Bush versus Dukakis eventually. Gore was running for president at the time. And, just being a part of that and being a part of the whole experience of being in a presidential campaign, I was running around the country doing things. And, for a guy growing up in Western Kentucky on a tobacco farm, that was pretty alluring and pretty exciting. And so all of a sudden you found yourself in the middle of a conversation around, the Iraq War or whatever it would be at the time NAFTA, et cetera. And it was just intoxicating. It was a great experience. I loved every second of it.
And you were involved in a lot of the tech side of that administration as well, right? So was that kind of your foray into discovering maybe the technology sector and entrepreneurship is for me? Kind of talk about that inflection point that steered you into the path that you ultimately ended up on.
Yeah, so I sort of stumbled my way into the technology area. Al Gore, I was working on his staff at that time, and he built his brand around tech. And people joke that he invented the internet, and I say, well, no, it was really me that invented the internet. But it was a lot of fun. And anyway, I sort of stumbled my way into being a tech guy with Al Gore, and got to really learn a lot and became more and more involved. At that time, there were a lot of battles between the cable companies and the telephone companies and all. The internet was just sort of catching on. And so it was a good time to be in tech. And so really enjoyed that experience, and actually went on to work for a member of the House of Representatives after I worked for Al Gore as a deputy chief of staff for a House member from Nashville, and got more involved in technology, and eventually parlayed that into running a technology trade association in Washington, D.C., and became editor for a magazine called Advancing Microelectronics, which was really hot stuff back then. So,
Well, I want to, before we move on, because you got to participate in the dot-com boom, and you're an entrepreneur during those times. I'm curious if there was anything you felt like you really took away that really stuck with you through your experience in politics that helped you on your path of being an entrepreneur. If there's anything that kind of stands out as like this was something that stuck with me.
yeah, in politics, it's eat or be eaten, and it's survive or die. I mean, those are. There's really no middle ground when it comes to the world of politics. Even though there's the world of compromise, that rarely happens for an individual who lives the political life. So, like I said, it's eat or be eaten, and so, when you're in politics, you learn to take a lot of arrows. You learn to take a lot of bullets, and I had a lot of road mileage in those days, and you learn a lot of lessons. You learn about you can't win every time, and you take the small wins and you build from them, and you take the small losses and you learn from those as well. And I think politics plays so well into entrepreneurism. They're almost identical in many ways. How can I sell something to you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, a lot of communication
Yeah.
background comes into handy there, I'm sure. So do you walk us through the dot-com bust and era and, what you experienced on that front? I think, looking back, so many people just talk about the bust, but talk about the excitement and, what that time period was like and how you participated in it.
Yeah, so I transitioned from Washington. I really kind of wanted to get out of D.C., and I was recruited actually by a public relations firm in Nashville to continue to work on technology trade issues, helping at that time the cable company again was battling with Northern Telecom and some other companies trying to figure out who was going to run the cable business basically in Nashville. And I was sort of brought in to sort of help mitigate that with the mayor's office, et cetera. And over time, I remember going to my boss. She was an older lady at the time, and I remember saying, I think this .com thing is really going to catch on. And this was like 1998 or something. And she basically told me, just go back to your cube and do your job and don't worry about it, And I remember saying, no, I think there's really something here. And it took me a minute to think through some ideas, et cetera. And there was a hot internet incubator that started in Nashville called eConception. And so I called the guy up that ran it, a guy named Joe Friedman, and I said, hey, I got this idea. And he's like, let's hear it. And so we met at a bar. I pitched it to him, basically drew it out on a napkin. And he's like, great, I'll commit $1.2 million to it. And so I'm like, is that it? Like, this is it? I had the lawyer send the paperwork, and wow. And so that was my experience with the .com. I mean, it was exciting. And there were 9 companies in that portfolio, that eConception portfolio. And, we were all big dreamers, and we had everything from a record label concept to mine was a public relations sort of online version. And we had others that were, trying to save the world, and others that were doing video online, which back then was like crazy thoughts. And, anyway, it was super exciting. It was man, I couldn't wait. Every Friday we would have a meeting of all the CEOs at once, and we go over what was happening. And man, we just shared great ideas, and it was like very exciting time.
And you all were one of the only company, or one of the few companies that actually made it through the downside of the .com, I guess, burst. So talk about that experience as well.
Yeah, so this is one of those moments where you learn you need to pivot as you go through things. So the .com boom was super exciting, et cetera. Well, the bust happened almost as fast as the boom did. I mean, it was literally one day I came into the office and like employees from other companies were stealing the office chairs. They weren't getting paid. They were taking the fax machine out of the wall. You know, like this was like scary stuff, and it was very quick. And so my company, fortunately, we had at that time, that's kind of funny to say, but at that time we had to wait like 8 to 10 months for your website to be built, you know? So it was like, that was a long time. And so in the meanwhile, we built a little bricks and mortar business, a side business to this. And so that helped us when everybody else was failing, that helped us sort of get through that. We had the bricks and mortar mixed with the online, and that allowed us to sort of survive. We were the only company that survived in that bust, and it was a scary time, you know. And we had to navigate. As a matter of fact, one of my employees came to me because we were struggling. It wasn't easy. And one of my employees said, I got some old servers in the back here, and they're really old. But if I kind of duct tape them together and put them together, we can create a server farm, and we can host websites for $30 a month. So even though the .coms had busted, everybody still wanted to hold on to their domains, and so we were able to parlay that to $30 a month, hosting fees, and help us survive that. So again, pivoting is what we had to do.
Have you been keeping up with the AI space close enough to be able to draw parallels between what you experienced in the .com and kind of the hype that we're seeing now and the excitement around AI?
So it's a great question. I see so many parallels to AI and .com, but I do think I think the lessons we learned in .com have definitely improved. I think where AI is headed. I think you see so many AI models coming out now, and everybody's even building their own at this point. And at some point, I feel like you're going to see that sort of sort itself out a little bit. I'm predicting into the future, but you're going to see AI sort of, kind of come to the middle, if you will. And, there's going to be some great companies that come out of that. And AI is helping everything today, from medical technology to the way we process, our food orders. I mean, it's an amazing technology. So I see the similarities, but I do think AI is so much further along than where we were back in the .com days.
If you looked at the companies that survived the .com era and went on to be some of the largest companies in the world, what do you think they did right? A lot of people say, well, Amazon just did one thing really well and created a niche in books, for instance.
Yeah.
They took their learnings from books and applied it to what in your eyes maybe was some of the things that maybe was being able to pivot, being adaptable, but what helped some of the best companies get through that?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I really think that's sort of a business 101 question in some ways, because even a bricks and mortar company, you can get outside your lane really fast. And when you do get outside your lane, I think it can cause problems. And so that's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur, is you want to chase all the rabbits you can chase. And when you're chasing a whole lot of rabbits, you lose focus on the one rabbit that you can bring home to take as a meal. But I think from the .coms that survived, to your question, I think, to your point, I think I agree with you 100% that, those that focused and really stayed true to their mission did well. Amazon being a great example. They started with books. Now, they sell everything now, right?
Yeah.
So, but they did that really, really well. And then they slowly added these other things. And now look at them, they're huge. So a lot of the .coms that started in those days they're no longer. So I remember when I worked in Washington, D.C., I had a secretary, but believe it or not, back in those days we had secretaries. And my secretary came to me and she said, my daughter got this job offer. We lived in Reston, Virginia at the time. And she said, my daughter got this job offer, but they don't want to pay her any money. They just want to give her stock. And I said, that's ridiculous. You know, she needs to make money. I said, what's the name of this company? She goes, it's called America Online. You know, she was like, she ended up being this girl, fortunately did not listen to me. She took the job. She was like employee number 5 at America Online and she bought her mom a house eventually with the stock she got. So she did really, really well, but fortunately she didn't listen to me. But who knows America Online anymore? You know, I mean, that was a very successful .com that's long gone.
So I want to get into VendEngine now. So listening to your story, it sounds like the origin of VendEngine was you were listening to an NPR segment about families that have loved ones that have been incarcerated, and they had to drive great distances and go to great lengths to be able to provide resources and funds to their family members that were in jail. I'm curious if you could just kind of compare and contrast. You know, when you started the first company during the .com boom, you wrote it down on a napkin and you suddenly had 1.1 million in funding. You didn't raise any funds for VendEngine, so quite a different venture. If you could just kind of talk about that experience and how it was different from the first time around. Let's just kind of get into talking about that business.
Yeah, so like you said, I was listening to NPR one day, and I heard this just awful story about people who have to support people who are incarcerated. And I didn't know anything about this industry. I'd never had an experience with this at all. But the story really touched me, and it felt awful. And these people were being preyed on, and all. And the fact that people would, you know, have to make a collect phone call that would cost them $40 to make a 5-minute phone call. It's awful. These are very poor people, in many cases at the very worst point in their life, and there are people taking advantage of them. So anyway, knowing cloud technology, I thought, well, surely I can help with this in some way, but I don't know anything about it. So I sort of I reached out to my county sheriff, a great guy named Dusty Rhodes. I mean, can you imagine a better sheriff name? You know?
That's definitely a movie.
Yeah. So Dusty, I reached out to Dusty and I said, tell me about this. He said, yeah, it's a real thing, you know, you get a lot of, you know, but nothing I can do about it. I'm just a sheriff, you know? And so I thought, well, I can do something about this. So I met with him. He introduced me to some others. I actually went in, I had him book me into the jail. I sat down with the inmates and said, tell me about this experience. I don't know anything about this. What can I do to help? And I just listened. And it took 2 years of that. I just listened. And I heard their stories. And meanwhile, I started to build a business plan in my head. And so I to your question about fundraising, I built the business plan. I had a great model. I mean, it was a home run model. And I went out and pitched it to the world, all the people I knew, and I couldn't find a single person that would listen to my story. It was just too risky. It was a field that had never been done, and it was just a population of people just, you know, they don't have money, you know, et cetera. So I had to really dig deep and decide if I wanted to do this or not. And but meanwhile, the customers, the sheriffs, the Dusty Rhodes of the world, were telling me that they needed this, and so we built a model. I got 5 rural county facilities in the state of Tennessee to beta, and they loved it so much within the first month they started telling their friends, and then I got a call from the state of Tennessee and said, hey, we hear what you're doing. We'd like to know more about this. And so there was this weird 1941 law that came into effect that allowed blind people to take over commissaries of jails in Tennessee. And I'm like, blind people, jails, it just doesn't add up, right? So anyway, I cut a deal with those guys, and they needed the technology, and we began to what started out as 5 kiosks across the state of Tennessee taking cash for people ended up being a multi-million-dollar business that we sold for 12 years later for a lot of money.
I think one of the things that stands out to me is, you know, a lot of people have ambitions to be entrepreneurs or have business ideas they might want to pursue. But the story that you just told, what stood out was that you just started to immediately take action.
Yeah.
You know, you went and talked to somebody and they introduced you to 5 more people. Yeah. And I think that's the piece that people don't do because they're scared to get immediate feedback. Action is scary because somebody's going to tell them that their idea isn't good. I always say that that's one of the reasons most people don't become entrepreneurs because they just don't take that first step of action and they just try to plan, build the business model. But you said it, you build a business model by listening. And so that stood out. But what was the business model? So you said that, this was a great idea. People wanted it, but how did you monetize it?
So it was a very, it was a very, very, very simple business model. Maybe too simple. That's why the fundraising people wouldn't listen to me. But it was built on the ATM service fee, right? You go to ATM that's not your bank, and you pay a $2, at the time, a $2.95 fee. So I just modeled that. I took that exact model and just said every time somebody sticks that money in that machine, I'm going to take a $2.95 fee. People before this even existed, people were having to get in their car, drive, 30 miles, just hand cash to somebody behind a counter somewhere. They don't know where it went. Half the time it didn't go where it was supposed to go. Cash, jails, it's just a bad combination. So by taking all that and eliminating all that and charging a $2.95 convenience fee, that's how we built the company. And we stayed true to that for 12 years. And it was a volume game at that point, right? So it was $2.95 day one. It was $2.95 day 3,000. So we stayed true to that mission the whole time, and we also stayed true to the mission of not knocking people's heads off. It was like I said, that NPR story is what started this. We stayed true to that the whole time, but it was not easy. It was a very difficult road.
Yeah, and I'd love to linger on the bootstrap part in particular for a little while. So, you need to support yourself. You need to have funds coming in. How did you kind of get past that initial hurdle of starting when you're still trying to get customers that are going to pay you, and you're trying to develop a company, and you're trying to just figure all this out? Like, how do you overcome all of those things that are kind of headwinds when you're just getting something going?
Yeah, so it's funny. I had a spreadsheet that I kept in front of me at all time. And it said, if I made 1,000 transactions, that would make this much money. If I had 5,000 transactions, I would make this much money. 10,000 transactions. So I literally, it was so micro. We were just keeping track of every single transaction. I was the only employee at one time, and I'm doing everything. Eventually, I had on my spreadsheet, if I got to this, I could hire a second person. If I got to this, I could get to a third person. Again, I'm trying to pitch this. I'm trying to get people to give me money the whole time. No one would give us money. So I knew I was doing the right thing by listening to the customer, but I couldn't get anybody else to hear me. So at some point, I just had to dig my heels in and say, you know what, we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, the way the UK taught me, the old bootstrap, cash flow management, and build the company that way. And we can talk about it later. It was hard. It was really hard. It takes a certain, I'm not bragging about myself, but I think it takes a certain person to survive that. And it was very difficult. As you mentioned, there were many missed paychecks along the way. You're waiting for customers to pay you, et cetera. But it was a cash business. This was an industry that was very cash focused. So, because a lot of people don't have bank accounts, et cetera. And so in some ways that sort of helped the payroll. In other ways, it made it another layer of a challenge. So
I'm trying to picture the end product, the kiosks. Did you build those yourself? Did you have a provider and then you kind of licensed that and built your own technology into it? What did the kiosk look like?
So the first was we built a cloud-based technology, and this was and it was a payment solution basically. So you think about PayPal or whatever it would be. So basically that's sort of where we started, and then we put that technology into a kiosk, right? So I went and bought kiosks. Actually, they were refurbished ATM machines that I bought off a bank, and we turned those into a reverse ATM machine where they took money instead of gave out money. And so as we built that out, we were able to kind of take cash. Well, then all of a sudden you've got the problem of collecting cash, So all of a sudden that became a challenge. We had to overcome that. But it was literally a kiosk machines bolted to the floor, obviously, inside of a jail facility where people would drive there, stick cash in all day long, and then we would take that money. And now we had a separate problem. We created a solution here, but now we had a separate problem. How does the inmate spend their money? So basically, we became a cryptocurrency, if you will, and a micro cryptocurrency inside the facility, where Logan has, now he's got money on his account. How can he spend it? So now we had to create a point of sale system that allowed. I mentioned the blind vendors before. Now they could put their candy bars and their Doritos and things like that on the system. So now I had to have a second kiosk because I can't just like hand an inmate a phone and say, order your stuff. So now we had to build a second kiosk for that. And so, yes, we started with refurbished ATM machines. We graduated to other things. And eventually, I'll just fast forward the story, we actually bought a hardware manufacturing company with the cash that we had built. And so we were able to buy basically a steel manufacturing, small little facility, 4 guys, and that became a critical part of what we did, and that helped fuel our growth crazy because we were building all of our own equipment at that point. So,
Yeah.
and we pumped out 3,000 machines a year or more.
Wow.
So,
Holy
yeah.
cow. And you also mentioned that COVID was a big tailwind and accelerated things too. So talk a bit about that experience.
Yeah, so when I started in 2011, I started as a cloud person. And people were like, the cloud, no way, it's not going to happen, especially in public safety and in law enforcement agencies. If you go back to 2011, every cloud story was about, the Russians hacking it or somebody hacking it. And, so the resistance was high. I was like, you're not going to put my data in the cloud. And so I kept preaching it. I preached it all along. And I said, look, either you're a cloud guy or you're not. If you're not going to go cloud, then we're not the solution for you. So remember, I didn't have any financing, so I sort of had to be selective who my customers were going to be anyway. I couldn't go build a on-site server for every single client. I just couldn't afford it because we didn't have the cash. So what we did was, you're a cloud person or you weren't. And I found that in the industry, there were about 50% who hated it and 50% who loved it. So I was the cloud guy in the industry, and I preached it for years. Well, in 2020-ish, when COVID hit, what was the first thing that got shut down when COVID hit? They closed the jails. And I don't know if you know much about that particular industry, but visitation and communication to an inmate is a right. It's not a privilege, it's a right. So all of a sudden, jails are faced with this dilemma. What do we do? How do we do this? We have to shut the jail down. We can't let people come to the jail because we're afraid that people are going to get COVID inside the jail. So I had built this small little video visitation product years earlier, and that allowed mom to be able to just get her cell phone. She could hit the button and call and do video, and it was all through public safety. It could be monitored and all these kinds of things. And I'd had some marginal success selling that. Well, that took off. And when COVID hit, now everybody wanted it. So we were the company that grew 40% during COVID while everybody else was struggling. And we were trying to hire people. It was crazy. Good times. Our revenue jumped about 40% during those days.
And so you exited the business, was it 2021 or
21?
21. I believe the transaction was for $84 million. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there, ballpark. That's just I think the significance really needs to be like underlined here of you bootstrapped it and you sacrificed so much throughout those, 9 years almost of building that business. And then you get to the exit, which is just the success story that all entrepreneurs want to get to, but typically they've given up a bunch of equity to get to that point in the first place. But I'm curious, after going through that whole experience and getting to the end of it, if you were to start another business, would you go through the bootstrapping phase again, or would you try and fundraise and get there quicker? How do you view it now that you've gone through both sides of it?
So I'm going to answer the question 2 ways. The first is going to be at the end of the story, I would say absolutely don't take any money because it's great, right? You keep it all, right? That's the great and that's the happy ever after story ending to the story. But to answer your question specifically, no, I would not do it that way. Years 1 through 5 were extremely difficult. I'm talking, like I said, missed payroll, run into the bank, run into the mailbox, praying that a check's there. It was hard. It was very hard. And, I lost employees along the way just because of the uncertainty of it all. And it was very, very difficult. I was very fortunate that I never had to hire a salesperson ever in our company's history, which was crazy because the sheriffs, the law enforcement agencies we were with told everybody else about it. So we had a pipeline that was insane. Our challenge was, though, we didn't have enough cash to address the pipeline, and I never could raise the cash to address the pipeline. So, here you are sitting in year 2, year 3 of your business, and you can take this world, but you can't do it because you don't have the cash to do it. And so that was very frustrating. So some of the angel investors that I had pitched in year 1, about year 3 or 4, saw what we were doing, and they were like, yeah, I'd like in. And by then, at that point, I really had to make a decision. Do I want their money? Because they still had pretty high terms. I've already proven the model. So I had to make a decision to not take their money or take it, and I decided not to at that time. That was a very difficult decision. I had people leave over that decision. But we did it because we knew we had the cash. We knew we could do it without them. But what could have been at the end of my story, we had captured 15 to 20% market share. We could have done that much faster. We could have captured much more market share and probably done even more. So I would not recommend it for an investor unless you just have a really healthy dose of just sucking it up. I don't know what to tell you.
Straight grit.
Grit, and
Evan, you have any more questions about VendEngine before moving on to the next section here? One of the things we didn't get to really talk about during the VendEngine story is not only did you have this big success with VendEngine, but you've been, as another podcast that I listened to called a parallel entrepreneur. Yeah. Started multiple ventures. I think you said 6 or 7 in that podcast. Some of them successful, some of them not so successful. But really what I wanted to zoom in on, since we kind of talked about the big success and what you experienced during that, is what are some of the failures that you had and some of the things that you were able to take away from those failures that ultimately contributed to the success that was VendEngine?
Yeah, so I think just addressing the term failure by itself, I think there's big failures, there's catastrophic failures, and there's small failures, right? So I think every one of them inform you and move you to the next level. And so I'll give you a great example that you'll probably learn more about me than you want to know. But I was having my house remodeled at one point, and I was doing the bathroom, and I got so frustrated with the process, and I said, "There's got to be a better way than what this is." And so I have a friend, a very close friend of mine, and he's Chinese, but he lived in Maryland. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, let's go to China, man. I want to hear about what this stuff is going on over there." And so he and I got on a plane. We flew to China, and he started introducing me to people, and I got so excited. I started a bath business. Okay, and I was remodeling my bath, so I started sourcing and importing really high-end bath luxury products. I got so excited about it. I took out a retail store space in Nashville, and I started sourcing it and putting it in there, and learned real fast. I didn't know a whole lot about the bath industry. I could sell really cool fixtures and furniture, but then I realized you had to fix them. You replace parts. You have to do things. I didn't think about that part of it. So, as we got more and more behind on the rent for the place, I called my friends and said, at 2 a.m., I need everybody to show up. And we emptied that store out because they were about to put the lock on it. And so we took it over to our warehouse parking lot, and I hired an auction company. We auctioned it all off. We took the funds, paid off what we could toward the rent. And so while people would call that a failure, it was a learning experience of don't get in over your skis, and maybe do a little bit more research on things before you get in, because it was pretty exciting and it was fun. We were going back and forth to China. I probably went there 100 times, but it was a lesson learned for sure. So that's an example of a failure. But I really do believe that every failure you've had, every success you've had, you really should be building on that and try not to make that same mistake again. Now, you can make it again, but try not to make it a third time. If you're making it a third time, the problem might be you. So that's one thing I tell people all the time. Build on your failures.
It sounds like you're somebody that gets an idea and you, like I said earlier, you take action on it. And I'm sure there's so many ideas you didn't take action on. What advice do you have for people that have a lot of ideas on how to pick which one to pursue? You said right there, like, you went after the bath space. Maybe you should have done more research.
Yeah.
So looking back over all the ideas you've had, what advice would you give somebody on which one, if they have a lot of ideas, to pursue?
Yeah, I always tell people, even at the Von Allman Entrepreneur Center or anybody I talk to, I do a lot of entrepreneurial sessions. I always say, just because you have an idea doesn't make you an entrepreneur, okay? An entrepreneur is grit. It's tough. It's probably the hardest road you're going to take. So having an idea by itself, that's fun. I'm glad you have a great idea. But surround yourself with really smart people if you're going to actually pursue that, because you can't do it by yourself. And so I think in terms of sorting through great ideas, so my son and both of my sons and my daughter, both, they have 1,000 ideas a day. Hey, Dad, I got this idea, I'm like, well, that's great. How are you going to make that happen? And so once you start getting past the idea stage and actually turning it into formulating a business model, the first place I always tell everybody start, let's get a spreadsheet. Let's look at it. How many transactions you need? Who's the customer? Where's this customer coming from? What's motivating this customer to buy this? Is this a need or is it a want? Is it there's 1,000 questions you can ask. And usually by the time you sort through all that, they've lost interest in their idea. And so, after if they survive that kind of rigor, then maybe let's talk about starting something. But, having an idea doesn't make you an entrepreneur. So,
yeah, no doubt about that. Well, to kind of bring it back to Kentucky here and to the University of Kentucky, you just got the induction into Gatton's Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Huge congrats on that. You're also the chairman of the board for the Von Allman Center for Entrepreneurship, which I got to be very involved in. I believe Evan got to have a few experiences with them near the end of his college career as well. I'm curious why you have chosen to stay involved with the university and why, you're down in Nashville. Why come back to Lexington and give back to the university? I mean, what does that mean to you and why is that important to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Growing up in Western Kentucky, there was no greater dream than to go to the University of Kentucky. First of all, I was going to play basketball for UK, but at less than 6 feet and awkward basketball skills, that didn't work out for me. So next best thing, play rugby, right? But I wanted to go to the University of Kentucky so bad, and so growing up as a kid, that was super important to me. Well, that stayed with me my whole life. Even when I went to Washington to work there, I stayed connected to Senator Ford, Wendell Ford. He was a senator from here and I just always kept my Kentucky roots, and I loved it. I've just always loved UK. And my mom was a passionate UK fan as well. My dad's an alumni from here. So, UK is a part of me. I mentioned to you that Dr. Krisloff kind of took me under his wing and kind of taught me he called it the greater fishbowl of life. There's more than academics. There's more than these things. And you need to experience everything. And so that's what UK, I found myself here at UK. And so I loved it here and I continue to love it here. So being a part of the Von Allman Center, talking to entrepreneurs, walking with them, sometimes, we didn't ask about mentorship, but sometimes when you're talking to an entrepreneur and you sort of mentoring them, sometimes mentors aren't always good people, sometimes a mentor needs to just tell you the truth. And that's part of working with entrepreneurs is being real and tell them, look, less than 10%, 12% of entrepreneurs are going to make it past their first year. And then after that, less than half are going to make it to year 2. Less than 2% are going to make it to year 10. So let's not waste our time. Let's not waste your time. Let's get this. If you're going to be real, let's get it real. Let's try to move that needle to 25%. That'd be awesome. But let's do it by being smart, by working hard, and doing it the right way, not just because you got a good idea.
What place does a college play in bringing somebody closer to being an entrepreneur? You know, a lot of people say it can't be taught, but in your eyes, what role does a university play? Because in my world, when I was there, it was exposure to new ideas, new people, networking. But the actual task of being an entrepreneur, there wasn't much I felt UK could help me with. But in your eyes, what do you question that? Do you want to push back on that? What's your thoughts on where a university plays in that?
So I think you're right. I think it's hard to quantify or qualify that from a college experience. But I do think where the college can play a very critical role is teaching you the basics and really teaching you finance one-on-one, how to read a spreadsheet.
I always say if I go back to college, I'm going to do accounting. I'm not going to do marketing or economics, which is I did economics and finance. But if I went back, I'd probably just only do accounting.
Oh. I tell my kids all the time, learn how to read a balance sheet. If you can read a balance sheet and an income statement, you can solve all the problems. But not only just read it, but be able to like compare it to the last one you saw and the one before that, because those numbers will tell you the stories. And I think that's where the university can play a very vital role, is those very basic kind of business one-on-one things. Cash flow management, you got to bring in more than you spend. I mean, that's how it works, right? I mean, it's that simple. We want to overcomplicate things so much, and we want to do things. You know, we want to go take out a lot of debt, and that's not a good scenario a lot of times. But that's what the markets tell us. That's what almost every company you meet today is leveraged at some level, and that's good as long as you're bringing in income. But the income stops. That doesn't end so well. And so it's lessons like that I do think universities can do a very good job about teaching. And I think UK is just awesome for that. So,
well, to leave us with a final thought here, we definitely hope that lots of college students get to listen to this, highlighting a past alum that's had great success like yourself. You've given us so many good learnings from your experience, but just to leave us with a final thought for a college student that might be listening, whether they're just getting into college or whether they're trying to figure out what path they're going to take. If you had some final advice that you could kind of give them, whether it's about entrepreneurship or whether it's just about college and life in general, what would you leave them with? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think while you were in college, enjoy the experience. It's the best, just live it and soak it in, enjoy it and love it. But listen, pay attention, because you're going to need that boring stuff later. And really take that, soak it in. You're going to come out of college, take that first job. It may suck. You may hate that job. And that's okay, though. Take that and learn from that experience, build upon that. And if you're a student today, dream big. Just go ahead and dream. It's okay. I want you to dream really big, but let's put some meat on the bones. Let's be real, and take those one-on-one lessons that you learn and try to parlay that into something meaningful that's going to take you, whether you want to change the world or whether you want to just be a good dad. Those things are super important, and these are lessons you're going to learn right now while you're in college.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Glad we got to sit down in person here. So excited to get this one out to our audience and to those who might be joining us for the first time with the association with Gatton. So Silas, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.